Hisoka recently made himself the target of the entire Phantom Troupe, and while Hisoka is strong, is he really strong enough to beat every Troupe member? Let's find out. We'll be going in order from the easiest for Hisoka to beat to the hardest for Hisoka to beat. And for now, we're just gonna focus on 1v1s. So we're starting with Troupe. This should be obvious. Troupe has no offensive abilities that we see in the series. While he does have a great ability, it's not a good ability for combat from what we can tell. He's also the only Troupe member that doesn't have a single combat appearance, and he pretty much has no physical feats either besides running on this wall this one time. The dude is a pure support member, and while he was important to the York New heist, he's not really someone made for combat, especially against someone like Hisoka. Troupe is also one of the Troupe members that has already been killed by Hisoka, which just further reinforces that he wouldn't be a challenge for the freaky clown. Another very easy one to beat would probably be Kaluto. Not only do they have an ability that's mainly used for support, but they're also very young and lack experience. While being a Zoldyck does give Kaluto an advantage over most people their age, I don't think it'll matter that much. Let's take a look at Killua, who is considered prodigical even by the Zoldyck standard, and after 2 years of training and experience, he's still not on Hisoka's level. This means that Kaluto is likely going to struggle a lot here if they even get the chance to attack. It doesn't help that the combat aspect of his ability takes a good amount of time to set up, which would leave him open to being obliterated by Hisoka. Really, I think the only way Kaluto walks away from a fight with Hisoka is if Hisoka decides to keep him alive because of his potential, but I think even that isn't too likely considering he has plenty of other toys to play with. Next, I want to briefly talk about another dead member, Paku. Paku is another one that I think Hisoka would have little to no issue with. Her combat abilities seem to be limited to her guns, and I don't think that they're going to do too much, all things considered. In fact, if she's using normal bullets, Hisoka could probably just block them with bungee gum with no issue at all. She's another member whose ability is pretty much completely unusable for combat. Not that I think she'd want to use it on Hisoka. I mean, who would want to look inside that brain of his? It might even do some psychic damage if she does. Anyway, let's move on to the next easiest member for Hisoka, which I think would be Shizuku. Shizuku is another member that is not combat-based, instead residing on the information gathering team with Shalnark and Paku. This is already fairly indicative of her combat strength being on the lower end, but she might be even less suited for combat against Hisoka than most Nen users. We know this by her own admission, as she states that she believes his ability is a bad matchup for hers. This makes sense when you think about it. Shizuku's main method of attacking in battle is bludgeoning with her vacuum. While it seemed decently effective against weaker Nen users, it's a method of attacking that can be easily worked around with bungee gum. On top of this, the sucking ability of Blinky would be greatly negated by the stickiness of Hisoka's aura, as Hisoka could just cover his own wounds with gum to prevent his blood from being sucked out, or he could gum up Blinky's mouth to prevent anything from being sucked up until Shizuku deconstructs and resummons the vacuum. Shizuku also struggled against Pike, a chimera ant, which is a pretty good indicator of her strength, and if she was struggling against a squadron leader like that, I think Hisoka might just outright overpower her. While we're on the topic of people that admit they're a bad matchup for Hisoka, we might as well talk about Banalonov. This is the first combat-centered spider we're talking about, and he truly has one of the worst matchups against Hisoka. Unlike the people below him, I don't think the gap in strength between Banalonov and Hisoka is all that large in terms of raw strength, or aura, or even intelligence. It's when we factor in abilities that the gap becomes insurmountable. See, Banalonov's whole kit centers on his ability to make noise with his holes to activate different musical abilities. But if the holes can't make sound, he can't activate said abilities. So, an ability like bungee gum, which should be able to gum up his holes easily, should greatly neuter Banalonov. There are two main ways I could see bungee gum doing this. The first is by filling Banalonov's holes with Hisoka's aura itself, and the other is by contracting objects that would prevent airflow to Banalonov. This could be stuff like paper, clothing, paper wrap, or even playing cards, which Hisoka usually has on hand. Without his abilities, Banalonov would really struggle against Hisoka, and this matchup only gets worse when we consider that the fight could happen anywhere at any place. So Banalonov might not even have time to change his appearance or get rid of his wrappings if he's wearing them. But enough about that Elon Musk ripoff, let's move on to Shalnark, who is a bit weird hard to place. Obviously, he's already been killed by Hisoka, but that was pretty much the worst case scenario for him, being alone, unprepared, and shocked by his friend's head being thrown at him. Under different circumstances, I believe this matchup could have gone quite differently depending on how the duo runs into each other. Part of what makes Shalnark so hard to place is his ability Black Voice, because it does allow him to get an instant win the second he stabs someone in the back of his neck with an antenna. This means this battle is truly a first strikes win kind of deal. If Hisoka strikes first, he should be able to overwhelm Shalnark, but if Shalnark sees Hisoka first, he could insert the antenna for an instant win. But this is Hisoka we're talking about, so I feel like he wouldn't let himself get stabbed very easily. He seems to be extremely adept at detecting Nen in general as well as detecting bloodlust, so I feel like he should be able to sense Shalnark coming depending on the circumstances. I think all things considered, I would give this matchup to Hisoka like 75-25, which I know doesn't sound like great odds, but it is quite a bit better than what I would give anyone below Shalnark on this list. Following Shalnark is one of the most interesting cases in my opinion, that being Machi. Don't get me wrong, most of the time Machi still loses to Hisoka. Her ability is kind of a bad matchup, as the threads for Nen's stitches can easily be tangled by bungee gum. Plus, the healing aspect will have pretty much no use because it takes so long to set up and use. But the ability could work decently if she sets up like tripwires and stuff, so it's not completely terrible like some of the lower abilities. The reason Machi is this high up is because she is one of the two people to have the biggest story-based reasons to kill Hisoka, as they have history and she did say she would kill him. These kind of vows don't usually come to fruition in Hunter x Hunter, but Machi's different. She's just kind of one of those people that gets it done and no matter what, so I want to have faith that she'll be the one. But even with all that said, I still think Hisoka would take it if they fought directly. If anything, I wouldn't be surprised if Machi was the one to find Hisoka dead after a fight or find him on his deathbed or something like that, like Geto and Gojo kinda. I definitely think this duo has a bit more story to go, and hopefully it doesn't end with her being dead. Next is Nobunaga, who is really hard to rank at this point because we still don't know his ability. Come on Tagashi, just spill the beans on this one already, please. Not knowing Nobunaga's ability means that we kind of have to act like he doesn't have one for this list. It's not like I can just make one for him, you know? But even without an ability, it's become clear that Nobunaga is a great Nen user and a great fighter. He's extremely smart, making important inferences from the smallest pieces of information, and he's also a master swordsman, having complete control of his blade from tip to end. He was also one of the Troupe's attackers along with Uvo, which just shows his strength in combat considering what a monster Uvo was. If it wasn't for the giant question mark that is his ability right now, I'd probably put him further in this list, but I feel like I can't exactly justify that with the lack of information we have. So I think it's best that we put Nobunaga here and move on to Franklin. Franklin is another weird one to rank. I think he's definitely one of the characters that has an ability that could be pretty effective against Hisoka's bungee gum. His Nen bullets cover a huge area and can even pierce opposing Nen abilities, as we saw in Yorknu. Now, I'm not 100% sure this would pierce bungee gum, as Hisoka is a much better Nen user than Sachimono, but unless he shields his entire body with gum, he'll probably take some damage. Will it be enough to kill him? Well, it very much depends on where Franklin hits him, but there is a decent chance it does some serious damage. There is a big issue for Franklin though, which is close combat. We don't know exactly how good Franklin is in close quarter combat, but if Hisoka finds him in a contained space, he probably won't have the room or time to activate his ability, and as a result will have to resort to hand, and I kind of have a hard time seeing him beat Hisoka in that department. Following Franklin is Finks. Now this is a fight I would love to see. Just two strong dudes throwing hands, fighting all out, and you just know Finks would go all out too. The dude seems to have been itching for a fight since the day he was introduced, so maybe this will be his chance. Finks is this late in the list mainly because he has an ability that doesn't really get affected by bungee gum. Like, unless Hisoka gums up both his arms in a way that prevents them from fully rotating, he's not going to be negatively affected at all. On top of this, his ability is pretty good. One-shotting a Chimera Ant is no joke. Those things could take a beating, even the weaker ones. It's also an ability similar to bungee gum in that knowing how it works doesn't exactly make it easier to deal with. Sure, there is a difference if you have knowledge on Ripper's Cyclotron, but you would pretty much have to come up with a strategy to prevent someone from shrugging their shoulders. Not exactly an easy thing to do, but it's not all good for Finks. The odds of him getting to crank his arm more than a couple of times isn't exactly high, as Hisoka will obviously take note of what's happening and intervene, either doing damage to Finks or restraining him with bungee gum. Plus, even if it is hard for bungee gum to get in the way of Ripper's cyclotron, it's not hard for the ability to get in the way of Finks in general. It definitely can hamper his movements and make fighting a lot more annoying. Next is Phaeton. Now we're getting into the Phantom Troupe members that can actually stand up to Hisoka. Probably. It really depends on if he gets the chance to use his ability. The issue with an ability like Pain Packer is it requires the user to take damage to activate. This means that someone with a high level of lethality could probably kill Phaeton before his ability activates. You know who is extremely lethal when he wants or needs to be? Hisoka. If Hisoka decides not to play with his food on this member, he should be able to win with no issue. But if he does decide to play with this meal, like we know he likes to, then I think it would be hard for him to win. As strong as Hisoka is, he's not strong enough to survive the sun, you know? So, like Shanark, I think this would be a fight that Hisoka would win if he finishes it quickly. If he doesn't, I have a hard time seeing him win. This is also pretty similar to how I feel about our next member, Illumi. Illumi is a lot like Shanark, but with even more options and somehow even more ruthless. He's also much more knowledgeable on Hisoka in general, since the two were BFFs for a while. An ability like Illumi's would also exploit Bungee Gum's one weakness, which is large crowds. It's just not an ability that's great at crowd control, as we saw in the Chrollo and Hisoka fight. Illumi's needles also give him full control of his target once they've been stabbed, so there's no chance for Hisoka if he gets caught, or at least that's what seems to be the case. The only potential glimmer of hope for Hisoka once he gets stabbed that I see is that Illumi's needles could be less effective against Nen users, as we've never seen him stick a Nen user with one, but I would say this is highly unlikely since even Nen users acknowledge that once a manipulator fulfills their conditions, it's game over. Because of these factors in Illumi's ability, I would say this fight could go either way. I can see both of them winning under a wide variety of circumstances. So this is the first true 50-50 in my eyes, meaning that from here we're going to get into a couple of troupe members that I think have a favorable matchup against Hisoka, like Uvo. It might sound weird to say that I think Uvo is stronger than Hisoka, but I do think that's the case. He is probably the only troupe member who has Hisoka outmatched in pure strength by a good margin. This makes him a huge threat, even though his ability is not an amazing counter to Hisoka. It's not bad, right? It's kind of similar to Finks's in that it's a really strong punch, so if he lands it, Hisoka would suffer significant damage, but it doesn't really do anything to prevent Bungee Gum. The main reason I feel like Uvo should be able to take it the majority of the time is he should be able to outspeed the clown. Enhancement as a category is based around improving all aspects of a person's Nen equally, rather than having any special attributes. Qualities such as offense, defense, and speed all fall under this definition, meaning that even if Hisoka were to master enhancement to the fullest he is able, he should still be about 20% slower and have 20% less defense than someone like Uvo. So unless Uvo gets really tangled in Hisoka's gum, I think he should have pretty good odds of overpowering the clown through speed and strength alone. Now, that's not to say that I think it would be a blowout. Hisoka is insanely crafty, and I can still see him winning under a number of circumstances. I think I'd have to go with like a 60-40 odds in Uvo's favor. And that, of course, brings us to the member that is the most likely to be able to beat Hisoka, Chrollo. I mean, he already beat the clown once, so surely he can do it again, right? Well, honestly, I'm not too sure. I think he has the best chance out of everyone in the troupe, but there's a few issues with Chrollo at the moment. The most notable of these issues comes from Hisoka's condition that the fight starts on site, meaning no prep time, just smash. This means that Chrollo might not even get the chance to summon his book before Hisoka starts his assault. I think this circumstance is unlikely, but it's still something we have to consider. Add to this that Hisoka got a major upgrade after dying, and I think this rematch would be way closer than the first one. Now, that's not to say Hisoka would win outright. There's a reason Chrollo is last on this list, and it's because he has pretty much the best chance at beating Hisoka. He is undoubtedly one of the smartest, if not the single smartest human in Hunter x Hunter. He has a myriad of abilities in his book as well, and quite frankly, we don't know all of them. This makes the fight incredibly hard to predict, but depending on where these two fight, Chrollo could have a pretty easy time. Something like Indoor Fish should give him a clear advantage on the Black Whale, and even something like his original original strategy would work too, just without the cloning. And that's not even addressing the possibility that he obtains the ability that he believes would give him a 100% chance to kill Hisoka, and upgrade his book along the way. I also think Chrollo's win conditions are a little easier for him to attain than Hisoka in more situations, and as long as he gets to open his book, he should win the majority of the time. The biggest question mark in this matchup and every matchup is how Hisoka's new Nen limbs will affect him in combat. Maybe they're super overpowered, or maybe they'll end up being underwhelming and not too different from his original limbs. We just don't know yet. I also personally don't think we're going to get to see this specific rematch, and that this is more of misdirection and another red herring from Togashi, but that's not important for this video. Anyway, that's all I got. Thank you so much for watching as always. Please be sure to subscribe, and I'll see you again next week for another video.